Hi, this is Simon from Tokyo Productions and welcome to another tutorial for Motion 5. And this time we're going to be looking at creating this glass shatter effect. So a lot of you probably have guessed how to create the 3D looking shards of glass, but there are a few other tricks that I think make this interesting, so I hope you'll bear with me. So I've got a new project here. It's 1920 1080, 24 frames a second, and the duration is 10 seconds. So I've brought in a background image to use to put behind my glass. You can really use anything you want. Let's quickly remind ourselves what actually shattered glass looks like. It's kind of a spider's web affair. So you've got your impact point in the middle, and then you've got radiating out thin shards. Then towards the outside of your shatter, the glass doesn't really break quite so much. Obviously we can't be creating all these hundreds of different shards. We're just going to be creating, I think, about a dozen, which is probably about the sensible limit for this. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, I've got a new group up here and I'm going to start off by creating my shard. I'm going to hit B for the Bezier tool and F7 for the HUD. I've got a width of 1, an outline colour of white, and a fill colour. Doesn't really matter what the fill colour is. So I'm going to click in the centre of my canvas, click up here, dragging a little bit, click over here, click down here, dragging a bit, click down here, up here, down here, and there. And that closes up our shape, and let's close down the HUD. Now if I come over to the transform, I'm going to center that up because I want to keep those numbers at 0. Doesn't have to be that way, but I just wanted to show you quickly how you'd achieve that. So now I'm going to select all my edit points, hit Command Shift T, and now I can move and resize my shard without the position changing. So let's just get that, so something like that. So now let's work on the look of this shard. I'm going to hit F4 to come to the shape style, and here under fill mode I'm going to select gradient. Then from the gradient presets I'm going to select grayscale. To open the gradient controls here, I'm going to take this left hand tab and under the location I'm going to set that to 40. Then I'm going to take the right hand tab, holding down the Alt or Option key, I'll drag that all the way to the left to make a copy. Then I'll take the center tab, again holding down the Alt or Option key, I'm going to drag that roughly there. Click on its swatch and bring the colour down to somewhere like that. Close up the colour. Hold down the Option key and drag that to the other side. Then I'm going to take one of these dark end ones, drag it between those two, holding down the Option key again making copies. Again, one more copy, holding down the Option key, drag it between those two. So that's roughly the look that I want. And down here where it says start and end, I'm going to type a start Y value of 540 and an end Y value of minus 540. And that means that the gradient is running from the top to the bottom of the canvas. We're obviously just seeing a little bit of it as it's viewed through the cutout of the shape itself. Okay, and I'm also going to come down and set the brush opacity for the outline to 20. And I'll hit Command / to turn off the overlays. Now one of the things that's really going to make this look like glass is to have some really bright specular highlights running around the edges. And in order to do that, I'm going to come to the library, Command 2, and the generators, and I'm going to select caustics, and I'm going to apply that. I'll hit Command forward square bracket and move it below the Bezier. Then I'll select the Bezier itself, hit K in order to create a clone, and then I'll move that below the Bezier, Command forward square bracket. F1 for its properties, and its blending mode I'm going to set to stencil alpha. And then if I turn off the Bezier itself, you'll see I've got a cutout of just that caustics behind it. But what I really want to do is I want to grow that caustics so I see a little bit of it around the edges. So to do that, we're going to select the clone layer, Command 2 for the library, filters, we're going to come down to stylize and look for min max, and we'll drag that onto the clone layer. F3 for the inspector, and under the min max mode we're going to select maximum and set a radius of 2. And if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see, turn that on and off, you'll see that that's created a shiny and indeed animated outline. Let's come back to the caustics itself, hit F4 to come to its controls. I'm going to set a size of 0.25. I'm going to reduce the speed to 0 because I'm going to animate it a different way. And the brightness, I'm going to set the value to 100. Now you notice if I drag the slider I can only get to 50, but if I type in a value of 100 I can go all the way up there. That makes it nice and bright. Okay, to create the animation I'm going to add a filter to this caustics. So Command 2 for the library, filters, under the tiling category I'm going to look for offset, and I'm going to drag that onto the caustics. F3 to come to the inspector. I'm going to click on the vertical offset and then right click, add parameter behavior, and I'm going to select rate, and I'll type a value of 2. And if I hit play, you can see that that's now moving around the edge. Okay, so you're probably saying that that's not looking much like glass yet. So we need to do a couple of things. Let's first of all look at creating that 3D effect, which I'm sure you know how to do. Let me call this group shard. Then we'll hit L on the keyboard to make a replicator. Come over to the replicator controls, and down here we'll click on the 3D button. And that will add an extra set of controls to the shape menu, and I'm going to select box. I'm going to set the columns to 1, the rows to 1, the ranks I'll leave at 5. I'll open this size, and I'll set a depth of 15. And if I hit F1 to come to its transform and we rotate it, you'll see that that has 3D depth. I'm sure you've come across this technique before. Now, if you're familiar with this technique, you'll know that the number of ranks is going to determine how solid that looks and how plausible. Obviously, we can see the individual layers there. If I hit F4 to come back to the control, and let's turn the number of ranks up to, say, 15. That's looking much more solid. I could go even to 20 and that looks completely solid. Now that's great, but the more ranks you add, the more layers it's having to process, and it's really going to slow things down. So what I'm going to do for the purposes of building this project, and I recommend that you do the same, is to add this ranks value to a rig. So I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to add to rig, create new rig, add to new slider. With the slider set to this left hand circle, I'm going to set a ranks value of 1, come to the opposite end and have the value of 20. And just down here where it says range max, minimum and maximum, I'm going to type 1 for the minimum and 20 for the maximum. And now this slider will enable me to adjust the number of ranks. And because we're making a duplicate of this shard, each instance will get applied to this slider, and we can control the whole thing from there. Once we're happy with the overall project, we can crank the value all the way up and render it out. But we can work pretty quickly in the meantime. So I'm going to set that back down to 1. Let's zoom back out, come to the replicator, F1, and I'm going to reset that Y rotation. Now the other thing you've probably noticed is that this is not looking like glass because it's not see-through. And the way we're going to create the see-through look is by changing the blend mode of this replicator. So let's come down here and we'll select linear dodge. And now that's got a really nice look with those bright shiny bits on the edge and that gradient that we've applied. That's really going to look pretty nice when it's all animated. Again, we're going to reset that to normal just while we build the rest of the project. So before we create the additional shards, I want to add some animation to this particular one. And I'm going to be animating it along the z-axis, and then I'm going to be spinning it on all 3 axes. What I want to do is create a null object that will drive the Z position animation for all the instances. So I'm going to come to the top here, create a new group, and I'll call it Control. I'll hit C for the circle tool, and I'll drag out a circle. It really doesn't matter. It could be a rectangle, could be any color, and I'll just center that up. I'll come to its Z position, and I'll come to the first frame on the timeline, and click the keyframe button. Then I'll come to frame 4 and I'll type in a value of 150. Come to the end of the timeline and type a value of 750. And that creates an initial move and then just a slow drift. Let me call that null Z position. So then let's take our replicator, click on its Z position, right click, add parameter behavior, link, and we'll drag the null Z position into the source object well. And we'll turn off the control. And now our shard moves along with the null. Next we are going to come to the library, command 2, behaviors, basic motion, and we're going to select spin and apply that. F2 for the inspector. Let's call this one spin Z, and then we'll duplicate it, command D, call it spin Y, and we'll set the axis to Y. Duplicate it again, call it spin X, and we'll set the axis to X. So I'll have a Z spin rate of 10, a Y spin rate of 5, and an X spin rate of 5. Maybe let's reduce the Z spin rate to 5 as well, just so it's a bit more subtle. Now there's one more thing we need to do with this replicator, and that's to switch to the anchor point mode. Turn on the overlays, and you'll see that the anchor point is at the center of the frame more or less, and we don't want that. We want it to be at the center of gravity of the object itself. So we just need to eyeball that, something like that, and then the animation will take place around that center point and be more plausible. Command / to turn that off. We want to rename this group left center, because that's going to be the shard that's on the left and in the center. The reason I'm doing this is because if we need to come back and adjust the animation of any of these, we can easily identify which shard is which, so I really recommend you use the naming system. Right, let's close up that left center group. Let's close up the shard group, and I want to put that shard group into the left center group so they travel together. That's an important step. And now there's one more thing I want to do to the animation before we move on, and that's to add some gravity. So I'm going to make a new group, Command-Shift-N, and I'm going to drag left center into that new group, and I'll call it shards. Then I'll hit Command-2 for the library, behaviors, simulations, and I'll add gravity to that top shards group. F2, and I can control the amount of gravity, how fast it falls. I think I'll go for 25, and so that'll fall slowly, along with all the other shards that I include in that group. Okay, so now let's duplicate this left center shard. Command-D, I'm going to call it left top. Let's close up left center. The first thing I want to do is I want to come to the Bezier shape itself, Command / for the overlays, toggle through till I get to the edit points. Now I'm going to leave these three top points where they are, but all the other points I'm going to move. So move that one up, move that one up, move this one up, and move this one to here. Just adjust that Bezier handle, and we can really adjust that shard to taste. So that's that next one made. Before we move on though, we need to select the replicator, which is the thing that's being animated, and we need to toggle through till we get to the anchor point control, and we need to make sure that it sits at the center of gravity of this new shape. So that's what you need to do for each individual one. Duplicate, edit the Bezier points, come to the replicator and adjust the anchor point. So I won't go through and show you that entire process because it'll take far too long, and you've got the idea by now. We'll catch up when the whole pane of glass has been built. Okay, so now I've built up my full pane of glass. Not a thing of great beauty, but it'll do. Let's first of all change all the replicator's blend modes so it's looking a bit better. So I'm going to type replicator down in that search bar there, and that enables me to select all these replicators holding down the Command key one by one, and I can simply come over to the blend mode and set it to linear dodge. They all get set at the same time, and let's clear the search field. Now that's all animating together and it's not too bad, but one of the things that happens with glass is that the shards on the right need to rotate the opposite way to the shards on the left, and I'm going to come to everything that's called right, so right bottom, and I'm going to type a negative value for the Z spin. Similarly, right center, making sure I select the replicator each time, F2 for its behavior, again a spin of -5 on Z. Right top, F2, -5 on Z, and then the right hand pane, which is this one at the side, F2, -5. Just makes it look a bit more plausible. So really you can play with these values, do whatever you want with them. And if you remember, we linked the Z position to the null object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the right hand pane, select the replicator, F2, And down here where it says link to the null Z position, I'm going to change the scale to 0.75. And that'll mean it doesn't travel quite as far. And I can do the same thing with the left. So select the replicator, F2, down here, set a value of 0.75 for the scale. Just won't travel so far. So there's one more basic thing we need to do to make this look as though we're looking through glass. And that's to take our background and make a clone of it. So select the background, hit K to clone it. And then I'm going to add an image mask to this clone. So that's Command-Shift-M. And I'm going to drag that shards group into the mask source well. And remember to turn it back on. Now I'm going to select the clone layer, come to the library, filters, I'm going to look for blur, and I'll add a Gaussian blur. F3 for the inspector, and let's set the amount to 20. And now you can see that that's given it a sort of frosted glass look. So the more you increase that value, the more frosted the glass is going to look. So if we went for, say, 50, it would look very frosted indeed. I think I might just settle for 20 is probably enough. And the other thing I'm going to do is come to the clone layer itself, F1 for its transform, and we're just going to increase the scale a little bit to 102. If we step forward a bit, you can see it's giving us just a little bit of refraction. I can turn that up to maybe 105, probably too much, 103 let's go for. Just a little bit, we don't have to overcook that effect. I'm just going to add a light, so that's Command-Shift-L, switch to 3D. It's going to add a bit more drama. So first of all, F1 for its transform, I'm going to set that to 750. Then back F4 to come back to the light itself. Set the intensity to 300. Maybe increase the fall off a little bit. Fall off is very hard to get accurate control over. Really just depends on the look you want. Let's go for something like 5. So you could add a camera in there, you could add more lights, you could add a particle system just to create some tiny little shards breaking off the edges, for example. And then before you'd render, you'd come back to your slider here and you'd turn up that value to whatever you wanted to get the full 3D effect. Bearing in mind that the more of those slices you have, the longer it's going to take to render. So there you go. I hope that's been an interesting tutorial. Thanks very much indeed for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.